Let's take on some stories now. In Africa, we see the shilling has rallied there, rebounded to an 8-month high, extending gains that began mid-last month, and a trend that has lifted the Nairobi Securities Exchange to the best bourse in Africa on dollar terms. It can be recalled the Nairobi bourse was one of the laggards in 2023. We'll see if a big rally comes for that market in 2024. To our next conversation now, see international grain prices across board push the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations Cereal Price Index for February, push it down about 6.1 points to 0.7% from its revised January level of 113 points. That's a drop of 10% from a year ago. Let's hear why. Ted George, Chief Narrative Officer at Cleo's Advisory Limited, joins us now from the UK. Great to have you on the show. Thanks. Good to be back. So we're seeing grain prices, in particular, that's wheat and maize, are falling sharply over the past 6 months. What are the factors driving down prices?
Yes, it has been particularly sharp, the fall in wheat and maize. I mean, wheat prices have lost something like 60% of their value since March 22. And that was the peak when the world reacted to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the fear that all those supplies were cut off from the world market. But we've also seen maize prices, they're at 3-year lows as well. And the key reason is a really good global crop. Something like 1 billion tons of grain is expected to be produced this season across the world. We've seen strong crops in the main producers, Australia, Brazil, USA, Russia, even Argentina. But of course, locally, if you look at Europe, it was a very bad crop indeed. So good is the global supplies at the moment. We've seen China recently cancelling some future contracts for grain. So I think really the big crop is one thing, but I think also we've seen a lot of people adjusting in terms of the amount of consumption, the cost of living crisis, and of course the readjustment of global supply chains. That's a big factor.
And how's the global supply chain disruption playing into all of this? And are we out of the woods yet, when it comes to supply chain disruptions?
Well, not yet, but certainly the readjustment of supply chains after Russia's invasion of Ukraine really had an impact. Because initially, such a lot of grain was cut off from the world market, all prices went up across the world as there was a fear there wouldn't be enough supplies. There was the UN brokered deal, which enabled a certain amount of supplies to come out. But after that faltered, the Ukrainians experimented with a route hugging the coastline and then going along the coastlines of Romania and Bulgaria. And that's proved very effective indeed. In fact, in the last few months, they've exported more than they did in the same period even 3 years ago. So definitely global supply chains have adjusted, but there are issues out there. There's the Houthis and the Red Sea crisis, so a lot of shipping can't use the Suez Canal. And even in the Panama Canal, because of climate change, there's not enough water now for the locks to use very, very big ships. So there's still quite a few issues out there. We're not out of the woods yet, but certainly in the case of grain, for the time being, they really do seem to have fixed the issue.
All right, talk to me about how El Nino, climate change, what impact is that having on grain production, at this time?
Well, I mean, at the moment, it doesn't seem to have been too bad. I mean, El Nino does sometimes bring better weather for certain crops to certain parts of the world. But with the uncertainties of climate change, you never know. We've had strong crops, particularly in the southern hemisphere. That's particularly where a lot of the grain is produced. And that's partly because of the El Nino weather pattern. But of course, the worst of it is still yet to come. And there have been some regions which have been devastatingly hit. So if you're looking at prices, currently traders have the most bearish position they've had in 20 years. If you're looking at wheat or soy futures as well. And certainly it seems like there are enough supplies. But we're already seeing a response from farmers. A lot of them are starting to plant less for the next season. And so if you add in what potentially could happen as well as we swing back from El Nino even to a La Nina, we could be right back where we started 2 years ago with super high prices by the end of next season.
Right, definitely. We'll keep tracking those prices. Thank you so much for coming on. That was Ted George, Chief Narrative Advisor there at Cleo's Advisory. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.